Madam Chairman, my name is Tom Slevin. I'm a veterinary surgeon for 45 years in Castlecomer. And I'm speaking as a vet, and the way we see it, the latest study has confirmed this and found cadmium, sulphur and fluoride in the cattle or in the herbage. These are recognised pollutants in brick manufacturing, and they have a catastrophic effect on the young animals. I would add that Dan Brennan's farm is very near a brick factory. And of 270 environmental pollutants tested worldwide, cadmium is rated the number 7th most toxic. It causes an indirect form of toxicosis and affects every part of the body by substituting for copper, zinc and selenium in the cells. This affects cell metabolism, leads to the inability to maintain cell equilibrium, and has devastating results on the cattle. The young animals on the farm have all the clinical signs of cadmium toxicity. Their quality of life is very poor on the farm, and they never fully recover, but they do improve if moved from the farm. This problem has a huge financial implications for the Brennans, and possibly implications for their families' health. Thank you.
My name is Jim Crilly. I'm a veterinary epidemiologist. I was the first person to identify that there was cadmium present on Dan's farm in September 2004, when I took samples from the roof gutters that we examined, and we found extremely high levels of cadmium there. Subsequent to that, in 2005, a cull cow from the farm, which was slaughtered, was found to contain nearly 5 ppm of cadmium in the liver. To the best of my knowledge, this is the highest level of cadmium ever recorded in a bovine liver in Europe. Subsequent to these, the studies that are part of this report that we're questioning were carried out in 2007, 2008. It is our contention that these studies were flawed in their design, in that they didn't look at cadmium, even though 2004, 2005, there was evidence of very significant cadmium levels on the farm. The farm parts of it are directly adjacent to the brick factory. The outflow from the brick factory runs onto the farm, and the rest of the farm is exposed to the emissions from the stack of the factory. The brick factory got an IPPC licence from the EPA, having submitted an environmental impact statement. The environmental impact statement did not identify the potential of cadmium emissions from the factory. It should have done, because cadmium is a recognised pollutant from brick factories. The EPA then issued a licence to the factory without picking up that there was no requirement to monitor or control the emissions of cadmium, which at the very least is negligent on the part of the EPA. The factory then operated for the last number of years without any control or surveillance of cadmium emissions. We have found cadmium on the farm, but the studies didn't look at the farm. The researchers were specifically excluded from investigating the brick factory or the emissions from the brick factory. The only way they found blood cadmium, because I talked to them during the course of the study, and I said, you want to be looking at cadmium, because I found it there 4 years ago. They took blood samples from the animals that they were on trial on the farm, and they found levels of cadmium of 4,000 ppm. 4 ppm, 4,000 ppb, parts per billion. Which again, those levels were so high that what they did is they said there must have been contamination of these samples, and they excluded them from the analysis. In the report they said, we don't consider that we have to explain these samples because we are assuming they're so high that they can't be real. They made, the samples that were taken over 3 separate dates, in August and September. These 3 dates, they said they can't be right. We won't try and justify where the cadmium came from in those samples. Subsequently, they've taken more samples from the animals, and again we found cadmium levels that exceed, I think we can safely say the cadmium levels on 4 or 5 animals on that farm exceed anything recorded by the European Food Safety Surveillance The United Kingdom, food safety surveillance. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we don't have any cadmium surveillance yet, even though they're supposed to have it. On the studies, they didn't look at the herbage cadmium. They didn't look at the cadmium on the farm. One particular study in the report looked at the heavy metal status of the farm, but they didn't look at cadmium. They said the EPA looked at cadmium in 2006. The EPA said all samples in the farm were less than 0.5 ppm cadmium, herbage samples. The normal range of herbage cadmium is 0.1 to 0.3. To say that all the samples were less than 0.5 is to say that everybody in this room is less than 2.5 metres tall. It's not a useful statement. So what we're saying is this report, we would like it to be peer-reviewed, properly peer-reviewed by yourselves to nominate an appropriate authority to look at it in what was carried out and the interpretation of what was carried out. And we need some follow-up on the cadmium. Everybody agrees now there is cadmium in that farm. Nobody's saying where the cadmium came from. We have to look at where the cadmium came from. At the moment, last week, we were taking samples from the farm and we were paying for them ourselves. Dan is now reduced to being back where he was at the start, paying for his own samples to look for cadmium. Thank you.